Hello, and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I'm Joel Erickson. I'm joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. We are here for the First Impressions podcast. Big picture-wise, I don't know if we have a lot to say here because the Colts are in a situation where they need help. But small picture-wise, Jonathan Taylor ran for 211 billion yards, had two big runs, 65 and 70. Colts ran for 335 yards overall, and then they kind of let the Titans get back in the game in the second half, sort of inexplicably, or maybe explicably, depending on how you look at it. But Colts get a win. The reason we don't learn a lot is because the Titans are a really bad team, and the Colts generally beat really bad teams unless they're in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, I thought today was going to teach us a little bit about sort of the collective resilience and pride of these two teams. Not that that's how a lot of NFL games go, but this is just a very interesting moment for both of these teams relative to the week in that, the Colts are coming off one of the biggest meltdowns in franchise history and going from a situation where they would be firmly in control of a spot to the playoffs to kind of on life support with their playoff odds. And so, I was curious how they would come out at home, no longer having that in their grasp and having, just lived through what last week was and kind of reliving it throughout the week before they could move on. And then the Titans, and the other thing is I kind of knew they were dealing with a fan base that was going through that too. So did not expect it to be a real big home atmosphere, and it wasn't. The Colts tried it with the whiteout thing, but fans haven't really been. They would have been more engaged had they won last week. But the Titans on their end were, in a spot where their coaches went on a pretty viral rant about how this team isn't soft and he's sick of people claiming that, and that whether they win or lose, that's the furthest thing from the truth of what they are. So it's like this is their opportunity to come into a building of a division rival and play spoiler and knock them out and answer some of those narratives. And it did feel like at some point the game either way was going to be decided in the trenches. And it was. And we saw who won that. It was the Colts. And I feel like that can just roll us into our hero of the game because there's only really one way to go with the hero of the game. It's Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor today, just crazy performance. He put up 29 carries for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns. Averaged 7.5 yards a carry, 2 touchdown runs of more than 60 yards. Just one of the best games he's ever played. Maybe the best probably since that Buffalo game. I don't think will ever be topped. But in 2021, when he had the 5 touchdowns and beat a really good team on the road. But this is the best in probably since then, including last year against the Texans, because today was just so outrageously explosive, and it came in a game where it became pretty obvious that the Colts were going to use him. We're just going to run with him, and Titans could not do anything about it. Pretty good Titans defense for all the problems they have. They're top 10 in defense, the top 5 in yards per carry allowed coming into this game, and the Colts set a franchise record for rushing today. So that kind of ended up being the story of the entire game. I feel like everything in this podcast with these categories, we're going to tie back to that specific part of the game. And Jonathan Taylor, not only was he prolific, but the timing of it coming after last week with the dropped touchdown upon review and him being at the center of that collapse, he was a big one to test how he was going to respond to this. And this was about as thunderous of a response you can have, understanding that you can never take back that drop touchdown. And if they don't get help, that's going to stay firmly in the minds of everybody. This won't make up for that, but it did help him move on, I think, and remind people that, despite one really horrible mistake, he is an absolutely electric player. And it was impressive resolve to me to be able to move on the way he did.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's gotten lost, and maybe in this game a little bit, is that the Titans, as bad as they are as a team, actually had a pretty good run defense coming into this game. They were 6th in the league in yards per carry allowed, 12th in yards per rush. That has, or not yards per game, sorry, rushing yards per game. That has more to do with the fact that they've turned the ball over so much and gotten behind so much that teams have just kind of run the ball out on them. But yeah, this is a team that had stopped the run pretty well, and those rankings are going to fall considerably. I would be very interested to see how far the Titans have fallen from 6th and 12th after giving up 335 on 50 carries. Yeah, outside really of, it looks like a couple of games. Well, they did give up 267 to Washington 3 games ago. So maybe they've had a little bit in them, but since then they've given up 2.7 and 3.9 per carry. They've only given up. They've been about half of their games have been over 100. Again, they've given up a lot of high carry games because their offense isn't good enough to give them the lead. But they've been kind of boom or bust. But it's not a bad rush defense by any means. It's pretty good over the course of the season. And you know, I crunched some numbers. It turns out when Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson are together, they're pretty good. I think they're at like something like 150 yards per game, 4.9 or 5 yards per carry pretty soon. And those numbers will put you at the top. The problem is injuries, the benching. They haven't always been together this season, so the overall numbers don't look like that. But this, to me, was a reminder of like what we talked about when they first drafted Anthony Richardson, was those two guys paired together in a running game could be deadly. And this was like the ceiling. This was like the real ceiling of what it could be, was just running all over a defense that had been pretty decent against the run.
Yeah, this was, there's so much talk last year coming off the final game when Jonathan Taylor had 188 yards, ran all over a Texans defense that was really good against the run. So much talk about what's going to happen when you combine that player with a quarterback who's the most athletic in the history of the game, who, is the first quarterback in history to run for 4 touchdowns in his first 3 games, and they never got that chance. And so this year it's been clunky for the reasons you laid out with the benching, and Taylor got hurt and Richardson got hurt, and a lot of other strangeness in there about how to use these guys and when to use them, and offensive line issues. Kind of a lot of these things kind of made them a bit, delayed maybe this backfield from hitting the ceiling that all of a sudden it's hit. And that was one of the things that I think last week, that drop touchdown ball, rightly, but it overshadowed, is the fact that like they ran crazy last week and Taylor ran crazy, and that happened on a 40-yard untouched touchdown. And that's the maddening part about it, is like it was such a great run that nobody could catch up to him. The only way he was not going to score was to drop the ball there. But hidden within that was like they were hitting the identity that they want. They'd gotten to it against the Patriots in terms of how much they went to the run game, how they put it on those 2 at the end, going for 2 and scoring and winning. You combine that with getting, Ryan Kelly back. It turned out that, I wasn't sure. A lot of people kind of questioned, who the best center is on this team. He didn't play very well early in the season. He's getting up there, we know, and how long of a career he's had. But that was a big sea change, I thought, and just the way they ran the ball too. Today was just stylistically, the attempts that they did to it situationally. It all came together today. That's kind of the frustrating thing, is this is like the tease to this is kind of what you wanted them to be early in the season. A lot of reasons we laid out of why they weren't. But also, you wish that there was more to this team than just this. And we'll get into those other flaws, but they all showed up today is what ended up making this a close game. But running game wise, this may be the best running game they've ever had, because the other games that they've had with Jonathan Taylor's went nuts. Last year against Houston, the Patriots and Jets and Bills games in 2021, none of them had the quarterback element to it. So that when they're in for a while here, they were trading off runs. They both had over 10 yards of carry in the first half. Obviously, as time went on, they gave Taylor more of the workload, and that was always going to be the vision. But like this was kind of how this was supposed to go this season from a run game standpoint. And so this was just a bit out of nowhere. I mean, I knew they've been running well with these two. I wouldn't be surprised. I wasn't, if you told me they were going to run pretty well today, that's not a surprise. But man, some of these numbers are crazy. 50 carries, 335 yards, 4 touchdowns. To run it 50 times and average 6.7 yards a carry on this defense is just insane.
Yeah, they the numbers are, like, it's the ceiling, because like you can't really run for a franchise record every game. It's just not possible. But yeah, to your point, franchise record in rushing yards, a big one. I think I'm going to give hero of the game to Shane Steichen. I know some people are mad at him for pulling Taylor in the third quarter. They were up 38-7 or 38-15 at the time. They actually got enough from the running game to get a field goal attempt out of that drive. I don't think there's a good answer for a coach in that situation, really. Like, if you don't pull him and he gets hurt, it's why was he in there? If you do pull him and they come back, it's like, why wasn't he in there? Realistically, them coming back will probably get more towards my villain of the game, but like, I blame that more on the defense. They gave up 1 touchdown drive in 2 minutes and 13 seconds. They gave up another one really fast. Like, after DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore kind of stemmed the tide from the early stuff, it just felt like the defense in general just kind of like collapsed. And maybe I'll just go into villain of the game now. Can I give it to the middle of the defense again? Just the soft center.
The center.
Julian Blackman playing through the shoulder injury is part of it. Zaire Franklin in coverage is part of it. They gave up 9 catches again to the tight end. Like, that's exactly how you get points against this team. You just throw at the soft underbelly in the middle of the field. Zaire does not do a good job of closing on receivers in the open field. Julian's got tackling issues because of his shoulder. You get a bunch of yards. And it's been a problem all season, and they're lucky that their running game was so good today that it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, just really brutal game for the defense outside of a couple of playmakers who did show up. DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, I give them a pass on this. But outside of those two, for the most part, pretty rough given what you're up against. Mason Rudolph. This team, Titans traded away DeAndre Hopkins, so you've got one guy out wide to worry about, which is Calvin Ridley, who was toasting them. He would have had over 100 yards if it wasn't for that hands to the face penalty that wiped out a long catch. And then to give up 9 catches for 81 yards to their top tight end, Okonkwo. I was just looking up the most yards he's had before this was 70 yards because he caught one 70-yard pass against the Texans somehow. But today, for him to go for 81 yards, 9 catches on only 11 targets, it was just an automatic connection, which is not what you want to give to a backup quarterback stepping in on the road. And it's not like a tight end who should necessarily be that. So that was the biggest issue again, was that. And then, they got to the run game in the second half too. So for my villain of the game, I'm gonna kind of double up on that. But I'm just gonna go with the linebacking core specifically. I guess that's the same sort of thing. Again, some of it, these guys are trying, and some of it's like injuries. EJ Speed was out, though I don't think the things we're talking about he was a solution to. But Jalen Carlisle's first game back from injured reserve. Grant Stewart, great special teamer, but his strength is not going to be coverage. They just didn't have guys to be able to do this. And Julian Blackman isn't making up for it with his shoulder injury. Nick Ross has had a fine season, but he's not like – you were never supposed to count on Nick Ross to make up for what these linebackers aren't doing. So just to me, the linebackers are the whole reason that Titans got back in it. Some physical runs. Tony Pollard went 8 carries for 35. They just couldn't stick with that because they were down so much, so they went to the air, and it was like when they attacked Kenny Moore, he got 2 picks. But it was like they attack anybody else in the middle of that field, and that's how he completes 68% of his passes, and they're getting 2-point conversions. And it was if Anthony Richardson doesn't hit Michael Pittman to convert that play to wind the clock down, and then they punt it deep, to where Mason Rudolph's basically doing a hook and lateral type of play. I don't know. They may have the way that was trending. They might have had a chance to come back and tie the score and then go for 2 to tie, which is crazy given a game where they ran for 335 yards and 6.7 yards per attempt. So, yeah, I agree with that. It's the linebacking core to me is just kind of earned it all season. I think like any time that this defense struggles, you can make one of them the villain of the game or the whole group like I am today.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Unsung hero of the game, I'm actually going to go with Anthony Richardson. So he had the interception, which I thought he threw late. No one really told me that afterwards. Anthony said he let the ball kind of he didn't like his ball placement. He thought it could have gone further out to the seam and not gotten so far into the safety. I think if he throws it just a tad earlier and harder, Hooker still doesn't have a chance at it. But other than the interception, 70 yards. And I think the biggest thing for me for Unsung Hero is just once this got down to a 1-score game, they had to get a drive. And Taylor really couldn't do anything on that because the Titans knew the Colts were going to run and had everybody up there and we're going to give it to Taylor. And so he didn't really do anything on that drive. The two big plays were Richardson completing a pass to Michael Pittman Jr. for a first down on a 3rd and long, and then him running for 10 yards on a 2nd and 8 to get the second first down and essentially run out the clock. So that's the unsung hero part of it for me. Is just there's still a lot to not like about him as a passer. There were 3 misses on the first 2 drives. One of them was an interception. But the running, what he opens up for Taylor, and just when they had to have it there on that last drive, he came up with some plays. So unsung hero, I don't think we learned a ton about him today. We already knew that he was a good runner. We already knew that he opened up things for running backs. He didn't have to throw that much. But in terms of this game, winning it, those 2 plays were pretty huge.
Yeah, it's not been the season that they were hoping for out of him on a lot of levels. But, one thing that since the benching you could point to say that's a real positive for him has been his play in the 4th quarter in clutch moments. Denver game maybe notwithstanding as much, but 2 game-winning drives in that span. And then today, they went away from the pass for so long, but then when he has to make a throw, he does that to Michael Pittman Jr. on the type of throw that everyone, that's been haunting him. That's kind of the biggest gap in his game, kind of like those accuracy and ball placement along the sidelines. And he did it, and he stayed ready for it. And, also found a way to fit this type of game. That's the good thing about Anthony Richardson is when he's having passing struggles, there is still a way for him to impact the game. When you have 9 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown, nearly had that second one. His elbow was down at the ball's down. They took it off the board and it was very borderline. So very close to 2 touchdowns, averaged 7.8 yards a carry. He was able to really fit this game plan even, as they ran it this way. And then the final passing numbers, 7 of 11, only 11 attempts, but it was 11.9 yards per attempt. It was one glaringly bad pass was the pick, really terrible throw and decision. But that, the rest of his game, this was mostly what I thought would be a lot of the season, low volume passing, but kind of higher yards per attempt and a lethal threat on the ground. So he was able to fit this pretty well. For my unsung hero, I'm going to go with the offensive line, and I'm going to add the tight ends in there, Drew Ogletree and Mo Alley Cox, because today was the day that this all really came together in run blocking in a way that, frankly, on their side of this hasn't so far this season. I think the Colts leaned into what this unit's built to do when it has its main guys out there, which is a lot more power concepts. They ran a lot more wham blocks today than they normally do. That was like the old Jack Doyle special that got Jonathan Taylor, sprung for some of those runs that got him the rushing title. They got back to that with Ogletree and Mo Alley Cox, and they did really well. They started a little slow. You saw they're implementing some new run schemes, and they seemed to get either tripped up or kind of colliding early in the game, but they stuck with it. And once they popped that 65-yard touchdown run for Taylor, that's when everything, it was just like all this came together, all the confidence and the flow to it came together. Ryan Kelly, I'll throw in here, just as a shout out to making a real difference, because, there's Taron Bortolini, he added a lot of, I think, intrigue for the future. Danny Pinter, fit in for one game and then struggled the last week. But Ryan Kelly getting healthy and having the time to get healthy over that knee, and even to the point where, they thought maybe he could play last week. They gave him one more week to go, even though that was a critical game. You saw it pay off today with I just thought he's one that early in the game seemed to struggle a little bit, but once they got rolling, he was downhill, and he was executing these man assignments really well. And I mean, one of the touchdown Anthony Richardson scored was pulling play from Quentin Nelson, where he just ran all the way to the back of the end zone because the linebacker had no chance. I thought Quentin was phenomenal until he had to go out. And it just all came together. You saw how good of a run blocker Mark Lewinsky is. You saw Bernard Ryman fitting in nicely next to Quentin Nelson. You saw Matt Gonzalez looks pretty comfortable on the right side after just being so-so on the left side. They got these guys in the best places that they could for them. And, when they have a tight end group that's like this, that, they end up finishing with one catch for 15 yards. But they didn't need to be more than that. They needed to be blockers, and they were great blockers. And so funny little tidbit is Mo Alley Cox got back to his locker, and he received a text from Jack Doyle that said, "Wham block, best play in football." So when you're getting a shout out from Jack Doyle about your blocking from performance like that says some things too. It's just it's been such a clunky year for, tight ends all season long, offensive line for like half a year. Those guys all deserve credit today because I think they all came together and they were a big part of this being a franchise day for rushing as well.
Unsung villain of the game. I might go Latu here. No quarterback hits. There wasn't a lot of pressure on Mason Rudolph. I don't think the Titans' offensive line has been very good. Now, they did do a lot of like schemed up quick stuff and rolling and stuff like that. But just there was a point there in the middle of the season where it felt like Latu was starting to find his stride, and then it kind of went away again. It's not been enough from the rookie. I think, normally you would say, well, it's a rookie, you see what's happening, but the Colts themselves told us that he was going to be more of an instant impact. They just haven't really gotten it from him. And he's supposed to be there for closing down games. The last 2 weeks, Buckner's been really, really good early, and then I think teams have adjusted and put all their attention on him. And when that happens, Latu's supposed to be the guy who eats, and he hasn't eaten. So it's kind of a quick one, but it just feels like, and maybe it's more of a season-long one or this stretch one, but just we were expecting more from him. The Colts were expecting more from him as an instant impact guy than they've gotten.
Yeah, that's very fair, and I'm going to just play off that. I'm going to go with the Colts defensive line as a whole, and I'm going to tie Charlie Partridge in on this, the defensive line coach, because DeForest Buckner is having an amazing year. He's an amazing player. Started out this game amazing. That's just the truth of life, and that's going to be true whatever team he's on, whether you double team him, whatever scheme you're in, whether it's more the Matt Eberflus or this attack scheme or whatever it is. You don't really get credit for DeForest Buckner. Nobody kind of around DeForest Buckner should get credit for what he is. He deserves all the credit himself. But the rest of this has just not been there much this season at all. You mentioned a lot too. It just hasn't been that, they drafted him to be a day one guy. It's putting a lot on a rookie, and maybe that's, they deserve maybe a little bit of criticism for asking him to be the only new impact player on the defense. But still, when you're the first defender taken, there's rookies who impact it more than he's impacting it this season. Only had 4 sacks, and the lane opened up for him, and Samson Ebicom went down, who had 9.5 sacks last year. Has not really come close to that at all. And just overall as a team, last year the Colts had 51 sacks, and this year they have, I believe it's 35 now. That's that's a huge drop off for a unit that was supposed to take a step forward. That, I guess.
Yeah, Latu was supposed to be the finishing piece.
Yeah, Latu was supposed to be the finishing piece. That was their plan B to not getting Daniil Hunter, and it hasn't happened, and just not a lot out of this group. And you look at it, and let's see, they ended up with 4 quarterback hits today. They had 1 last week, so it's not even just about sacks. It's they're not affecting the quarterback the way that they said they were going to. And then I think they maybe not so much this game it didn't show up, but they fit into the run game too, as far as why that run defense has fallen off. So just there's 2 parts of this team that were supposed to be special this year. I thought that could be special, needed to be special for this to be a playoff team, and that was the run game on offense and the pass rush on defense. The run game is there now. It took some time, but it's become that. The pass rush has never become that. And I don't know that we've gotten a great explanation for why that is, when there's been, some, probably maybe a little bit more, more injuries than last year, but you still had, there's these games where DeForest Buckner's out there and there's just not much around him. And they've got enough resources up front. You can't say this about other parts of the team, but that group has enough resources to be really good, and they're just kind of average this year.
My backup, or this is the first, and I think this is the first Joel thing that's ever left me terribly vexed. You brought up the quarterback hit, so I want to bring it up now. DeForest Buckner should have 2 at least. He had them on back-to-back plays. They gave him 1 for the 3rd down one. On the 2nd down one, he reached through the guy blocking him and grabbed Mason Rudolph with both hands. And Mason Rudolph threw an incomplete pass away, and the pass was so bad that they had to explain why it wasn't intentional grounding. That's a quarterback hit. How is that not a quarterback hit?
Well, maybe I joked about earlier, the quarterback hit should go to the center. The center hit him. So I know that was kind of silly. Yeah, I
don't get that.
Did you touch the quarterback?
Yeah,
during the course of the play.
It wasn't just like a glancing blow either. It led to the incompletion. Just confusing.
Yeah.
Number of the day. I've got a fun number of the day. Do you have yours yet? Do you want me to go first?
I do. Mine is 6. So Jonathan Taylor had 200 yards and 3 touchdowns today. First NFL running back in 6 years to do that in any game. It's pretty incredible. 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's how it feels back to 2021 when there are numbers like that coming out. The Buffalo game, he was the first player ever with that kind of stat line. So that kind of shows you why he's the hero of the day. Is he did something that, this was his case, I think, for why you pay a running back is running backs don't often do this. That's why it hasn't happened in 6 years. He's a different kind of running back. He showed that today.
And he kind of has a game like this just about every season. He went for 250 against the Jaguars at the end of his rookie season. Obviously, 2021 was crazy. He had the big game at the end of last year. He's got this one this year. The really huge game is just in there for him. My number of the day is also Jonathan Taylor related. It is 4.39 with a bonus of 4.64. Do you know what 4.39 is?
Is that his yards per carry coming in?
That is his 40 time. Do you know what 4.64 is? It's the 40 time of Titans safety Darryl Worley, who was unblocked on both of Jonathan Taylor's touchdown runs. And let's just say they played to their testing speed.
That's true. It wasn't exactly J.C. Jackson trying to chase him down, though. I still think that's maybe the most badass play Jonathan Taylor's ever had. Now that I think back to it, when he had time to look back at the sideline.
Patriots one, yeah.
Soul of
and the Patriots one, I wrote this last week, but that was part of the reason that what happened last week with the touchdown was so surprising. Is that in that game, he was looking back to see if the coaches were telling him to go down, and then he has a brain fart in the worst possible moment. Anyway, both of those plays, go back and watch them. Number 35 is not blocked, has a chance at Taylor, starts chasing him. He does not get closer. In fact, in both times he gets passed up by a Titans corner who also can't catch Jonathan Taylor. So
we found the break in the Titans defense. They're top 10 because people don't get to the safety level. You get to the safety level and they're toast. That's what happens when Quandre Diggs gets hurt, I guess.
Was that unnecessarily mean to Daryl Worley? He's in the NFL.
No.
Game day observation. I'm going to let you talk about the crowd. My game day observation is that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I did not notice it. You're working during the game. Maybe I missed it. But they announced the state championship winning teams. There was a coach and a player from each team. They announced them with 77 minutes left to go before game time. There was no one in the stadium. It was pregame. They were down on the end line. I was doing my TV spot for Fox 59 and CBS 4. Why? Why not do that in the first quarter?
That makes no sense. I mean, fans are allowed in an hour before?
An hour and a half, but it was a real trick of the day. And there's usually not that many.
So an hour and a half. You're giving them 23 minutes to get in their seats to watch that. Which
the state champions.
I don't know what's coming.
The state champions from Indiana football. 0 cents.
Yeah, that's a bit goofy. Yeah, mine's just go to the crowd. They planned this to be a this winter whiteout. That's a pre-planned thing. The hope being that this is one of those home games against a divisional rival that can help propel you into the playoffs. And if 3 plays don't happen last week, it is getting to be that. But didn't really work today. It was they had these white shirt on every seat to sort of for fans to put that on and be part of the whiteout. A lot of empty seats today. Which is not surprising, and I don't necessarily blame people. I understand why you're at that spot right now, but it did not equal the home field advantage, and it was different than some other games. Like other games, they wouldn't have been empty earlier this season because road fans were really packing Lucas Oil Stadium. And the Titans fans are not going to do that with a team that has 3 wins, and so this was sort of kind of the atmosphere I feared, and that's why I credit the Colts for rising above that. Is that I think it was going to be very easy to sort of get lulled into a sleepy game when there wasn't a very big crowd there. But also, I'll just be honest, there's whiteout is an amazing tradition for Penn State that does it every year and picks one game and makes it a night game, and it's the darkness combined with the white and some of the it's just so fitting to them. And it's fine if others want to do a color type thing, but I don't know. It's doing a pre-planned winter whiteout that comes on the heels of last week's game. It's a little bit corny to me, and that's why it fell flat. Did not work today. You are muted.
If you're watching on the video and you saw me pump my fist, it's because Nate needs to know this too. Mizzou got Bo Pribula.
Oh, nice.
Nate and I both went to Mizzou. We were hoping for a quarterback. As usual, my entire evaluation is based on seeing him against Wisconsin. He looked pretty good. I'm happy. We're gonna move on. That's nothing, but I wanted Nate to know.
I appreciate that. Now I'm distracted.
That brings us to the interlude. We may have already started it with what I just did. 3 football things that gave me joy. 3 football things that left Nate terribly vexed. You've already heard that I'm terribly vexed by how you cannot get a quarterback hit when you grab the quarterback and force him to throw an incompletion. Nate, I'm going to let you go first. What is one thing that left you terribly, terribly vexed in this game?
One thing that left me terribly vexed is when a coach is so upset at the narrative that his team is soft that he's dropping F-bombs and saying there's no way you'll ever see that out of us, and then they go out and they give up a franchise record in rushing in their very next game. Not a good response to that, Titans, and how much of that's Brian Callahan's messaging, how much of that is players not responding to it. Clearly it's both, but that just kind of, to me, summed up why the Titans are what they are this year. Is we saw this with the Colts in 2022. I mean, it's one thing to be a team lacking talent, not getting the wins. You don't ever want to open the door to that and give evidence for being a team that lays down. Colts did it that year. It was embarrassing, and the Titans are doing it now. And just, man, it was and again, I credit credit the Colts a ton. I mean, mostly because they took it to them for this, and they reinforced that. And running 50 times on a team is going to reinforce that. And Jonathan Taylor's amazing, and Anthony Richardson's super super talented, but there's a reason it's a franchise record. Like, it has never happened before, and it shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen in this game. And if it didn't happen, the Titans might have won this with the way the Colts defense played and how they got rolling. But just a brutal showing for that defense in a game where there should be more out of them. I mean, the divisional game, you have a chance to, if the Titans win this game, the Colts are eliminated. So at least bring some fight. But they just they don't have that. They are soft.
There's a piece of me that always kind of discounts some of this team has everything. Well, not like playoffs. I think that matters, but some of this team is coming off of a letdown. This team is, their coach just said something fiery, so they're going to be up for it. Just because Titans are bad. They're very bad. And they were probably motivated at the start of the season too. And it didn't help at all. It wasn't all Will Levis. I'm still disappointed we didn't get to see Will Levis. My number one football thing that gave me
my thing, just real quick on this. My thing is, I agree with all that, and I'm not saying they necessarily are soft. I'm just saying, what a bad look the whole week that's.
It's pretty bad timing.
It's just bad timing. Whether that maybe they were 100% motivated today, but you're just giving evidence to the haters, which is not what you want to do in life.
My number one football thing that gave me joy, since I just said it, I'll say it again. Anytime a defensive lineman hits the quarterback with his own offensive lineman, it's one of my favorite things in football. Butner did not take it to my personal favorite thing in football, which I've only seen one time, which is when a defensive lineman sacks the quarterback with his own offensive lineman. I've only seen it once. It was a great day. I'll never get over it. I'll never forget it. It was Cam Jordan against the Lions when I was covering the Saints. He threw a backup tackle into Matthew Stafford and knocked him down, and then just reached out and tapped his foot. Just an incredible thing. Butner came close. He came close. Anytime a defensive lineman uses an offensive lineman to finish his pass rush, it's so much fun for me.
That was a lot of fun. There was a play where Joey Bosa did that to beat Penn State one year, where it wasn't quite that, but he just turned the tackle into a blocking sled until the quarterback just his knees buckled under the weight of his tackle. So it usually takes a superhuman level of ability on the other side to do that. Second football thing that left me terribly vexed. This was a joyous thing, but I'm still vexed by it. How Josh keeps his feet in bounds along the sideline when the whole defense, including his quarterback, already think he's out of bounds or going out of bounds. Just this nifty mix. He had that on the 27-yard touchdown. Then he had another play similar to it later on where he just ran out of a tackle to get the first down, and it right the first down marker. It looks like he's just going to run right out of bounds. The defender stops. Josh stops, almost like he was putting a fake on, and then just turns on the jets and runs up the sideline. And Anthony Richardson had a funny quote where he said, I just expected the play to be over. Then I see him still running. So I go, oh, thanks for that. So that was – I'm just vexed that he consistently how he knows where his feet are in every single moment, and that it's at the exact blade of grass to be inbounds, not out of bounds, whether he's catching the ball or running with it. It's a little bit vexing.
Number two football thing that gave me joy is a Mo Alley-Cox story. We don't get a lot of these. I love stories about the stuff that's said on a football field. We got more when Phillip was around. Mo Alley-Cox said there was a play in the second half, I think, where the Colts line up. Titans, I'm assuming a linebacker or safety, is yelling screen, screen, screen. And a defensive end. I led my story that posts on Monday morning with this. A defensive end for the Titans was like, man, they're going to give it to Jonathan Taylor. He's going for 300 on us today.
That's hilarious.
we don't get a window into that stuff very often, but it's always enjoyable. Anything that happens in that space is always enjoyable. Yeah. So definite football thing that gave me joy. Listen, that defender, they did their work. They did their work during the season, during the week. They thought formation recognition. They were thinking screen, and their defensive end had a cold dose of reality for them.
Mo tells such great stories with some of this stuff, so he's. I'm not surprised he's the one that had that to offer up. See, the last football thing that left me terribly vexed. Going to kind of play off something you brought up earlier, but when a front office puts so little behind a starting running back that he can't possibly get a breather, or like you may blow a 31-point lead.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's what happened today. So, like, I agree with you. I don't blame Shane at all for that. Now, maybe like he could have a little quicker hook. He probably just has to with where this is, because he knows that they don't have anything behind him either. But it's like, I mean, you're bringing in a running back against a tired defense, a running back who should be fresh, to play next to Anthony Richardson, who's going to give him a free blocker and influence the defense behind this offensive line, and tight ends who are rolling like they are. And they can't find a way to stay on the field. I mean, Trey Sermon today, 8 carries, 25 yards. So he averaged 3.1 on a day when Taylor, on a lot of volume, averaged 7.5. And, like, this has been the thing, like, every game all season long has felt the same way, where, like, Taylor's usage right now, like, in terms of plays, is just bananas. It's the highest snap percentage he's had. I remember doing the stat where changed a little bit today because they use these guys, but he had a stretch in 6 games where he took 114 of the 116 handoffs. Like, you just never see that in an NFL game. And it's like, I don't understand why that was ever necessary. I understand not bringing Zach Moss back because he wanted to go be a starter, but you lost a guy who had 700 plus yards and averaged more than 4 yards a carry last year and did not try at all to replace him. So, like, they're honestly lucky that Taylor's been as healthy as he is this year. This has been one of the healthier years of Jonathan Taylor's career. He's missed a few games because that's life as a running back. And it's just like it's not that they just lose the special ability with him. They don't have anybody who can play that position right now if he's off the field, unless it's just an obvious pass pro situation. Trey's good at that. But I just don't get how, like, a team can identify a player, especially a running back, as a guy you extend to pay more than all but one running back in football, and you're nervous about, like, will he hold up, and then put no insurance behind him to make sure he holds up. Is just vexing.
Yeah, the crazy thing to me when I went up and looked, because you rightly pointed out that we should probably put up what Shane said about his decision to to pull him. The crazy thing to me was when I looked it up, it was only one series. It felt longer than that, but it was only one series. And to your point, they wouldn't have to do that if they had a better backup. They just wouldn't.
And the score was that when it was 38-7?
38-15. They had just scored a touchdown to get to 38-15 with like 2 minutes left in the third quarter.
And hindsight is everything, but it's like, can you think about that? We're asking a coach about why he gave his running back one series off when it was 38-15.
And the other 2 running backs carried 8 times. So Jonathan Taylor would have had 37 carries if he took all those carries.
So it's like, there's part of me that I have criticized Shane at times this year for not using Taylor more, as you know, early in the season, but not when he has 29 carries today. And then it's also like, if they're going to make the playoff, if they're going to do their part to try to make the playoffs and they need the help and all that, this is going to be the model. It needs to be healthy. And, like, if they had kept Taylor in there and their defense was still playing fine and then he got hurt, Shane would have gotten a lot of scrutiny for, why are you still running him in a game that's over when you need him to have a chance at the playoffs? So it was just a lose-lose situation. The thing that's vexing to me is it never had to be that. Like, we're going to see a running back next week, Tyron Tracy, local kid, the Giants drafted, who would have been a nice addition, who was right in your backyard and not going to cost you very much. I think he was drafted in the 5th round Tyron Tracy this year is averaging 4.6 yards a carry, almost 700 yards. That's what Zach Moss did last year. Isaac Garendo, another one on local kid right in your backyard, who's on the 49ers, having a nice
super fast, super big.
Yeah. So like there were easy solutions to this that they just did not want.
Jonathan Taylor is averaging 19.8 carries per game this season.
Yeah, it's caught up.
They like, and it's to your point, it's because they don't have anyone else they can hand the ball to.
Yeah.
My last football thing that gave me joy. Some people might disagree with me on this because of the severity of the mistake. I thought running into the tunnel was fun. I did. Like, I don't know. I know maybe you sort of. I know you probably would rather that he's just very upset about it and always talks about it terribly or whatever. But like, you have to move on at some point. I like some of it resonated with me earlier this week when Taylor was saying like, you can't fix what's already happened. You have to worry about what's going forward. And, he poked a little fun at himself. The team had fun with it. Was it a terrible mistake last week? Yes. And it's going to be probably one of the things Jonathan Taylor's remembered for in Indianapolis, and he should be, because it was a really bad mistake. But I don't have a problem with him, kind of poking fun at himself by overdoing the running through the end zone.
Yeah, I was totally fine with it. I wrote a lot about that after the game, and just to me, it is about moving on. And I remember I remember it's kind of a random comparison, but the year that Virginia lost to 16 seed in college basketball tournament had never happened before, and they got mocked forever and memed into a bag and all that. Tony Bennett talked a ton about that. Their coach into the next year and just said, this has to become part of our story. In the very next year, they go and they win the national title. And I don't think those things were completely disconnected. Is it kind of owned that moment for them and then found a way to we hear all the time about you got to channel certain things as adversity and learn from them. And it's easy to say. And then if you're pushing it away and pretending it didn't happen, then you're not doing that. Taylor, he's never going to get that play erased. But this to me, like what you said, he's poking fun at himself. So he's not making light of the moment. We saw that last week. If you take it in context of how he answered last week, that's not what's going on. I mean, he was about as upfront and distraught and self-critical and did that again throughout the week. This was his moment to kind of move on and add a little bit of light and life to it, because he's trying to get light and life back in himself coming off of that. So I thought it was apt. Actually, it was kind of a message to himself and everyone else that he can move on from this, which is the only thing you can do at this point.
Yeah, that brings us to the sort of more serious ones. We're out of the fun part now. Too much credit, too little credit. We're gonna start with too much credit. Nate, this is gonna kind of stomp on my unsung hero of the day. But Anthony Richardson's maybe getting a little too much credit.
Who, from you?
Well, I've seen a little bit of he's got this big win.
No, I'm just kidding. That's why he's unsung hero, right? Give him credit, not too much credit.
Yeah. The 70 rushing yards were important. Those plays on the end were important. It was a better game than I think the people who are let's throw him out completely right now. Also, Malik Willis could have kind of had that game. We maybe saw Malik Willis have that game. The Titans saw Malik Willis have that game that year. When you run for 330 yards and the running backs combined for 265 of it, you should win the game, regardless of what your quarterback's doing. So maybe a little bit too much credit for Richardson as a start for a QB win. The legs help. They do help. Not saying they don't. Just, I don't know if he gets the full credit for everything that happened today. You just go, well, Richardson led him to another win.
Yeah, he fit the game plan. It was like a secondary piece of it in the run game and did that part very well. But What would have happened in this game if Jonathan Taylor couldn't have played? Very curious about that. Now, that's not all his fault.
That's a great question.
Playing with those backup running backs, but completely different deal for him. So no, I still think he's in the same general place he's been over the past month or so, which is he's going to need the offseason to really refine some of these things that are leading to turnovers and incomplete passes. And today was about, limiting that, and he played clutch, and so it was a small role, but not a big one. Too much credit. I don't know. I guess I'm just going to go with I want to say the defense, but is anyone giving them credit?
I don't think so anymore. No.
So I don't know.
I thought you were going to go the Colts for the second straight week.
Sure. We'll go with that because I can't think of anything else. Good job beating a really bad team. That's what it is, though. It's still well. This will be the nuanced version of that. It's like the run game was amazing. The formula was good. The response to last week from Taylor to Shane Steichen to the coach, just the overall everything. Everybody moving on from last week was good. Anthony moving on from last week was good, but they're in the same place ultimately that they were coming into the game, which is they beat bad teams. They had to really get credit. You're eventually going to have to do it against somebody good. One of those wins this year is the Steelers. So I don't know that a lot has changed for them beyond you played a game and you weren't let down, which is good, but also that's part of our, you should be expected to handle a bad team at home when you have something that you could somehow potentially play for. So yeah, we'll go with that.
Nate going for the record with the same answer in this category 4 weeks in a row for the next 2 weeks too. If they beat the Giants and Jaguars, you'll be able to do it for too much credit again.
Oh yeah. Well, especially the Giants are in line for the number one pick. So it's they would love it if you beat them.
Yeah.
Not the players and coaches, but the franchise would love it if you beat them.
Yeah. Where are the Jaguars in that? Third.
Yeah, same deal. And the Titans are fourth, right?
Fourth. Yep.
Yeah. So you're facing
the
1, 3, and 4. So yes.
It also means that since number 2 is New England, if the Colts do finish this out with 4 wins in their last 5 games, their 4 wins will be against the picks number 1, 2, 3, and 4, as it stands right now. Although they could really use New England to win next week and kind of fall out of that 3-win part, but
Yeah.
Okay, too little credit. Who gets too little credit for this game?
Too little credit.
I'm going to go Tony Sperano Jr.
Yeah, good one.
He's the offensive line coach, is usually responsible for a lot of running game stuff. I know from when Shane told us about his interview process for the offensive line coach that they're responsible for a lot of running game stuff. Got to give Sperano a shout out when they run for 335 yards.
Yeah, and reinserting Ryan Kelly into that, and in the way that they designed it too was very clearly a well-designed run game, different than they've done before. So I think he's not been his best in some of those areas to playing to the strengths of the roster in this season at times, but this was you kind of saw the upside again that we saw with him kind of all last year, early this year. Really, when they have their guys and they're healthy, it's clearly a different thing. Too little credit, I'm going to go with Josh Downs, just because he's going to get lost in the shuffle of all the run game, what the run game did, and which obviously was the catalyst. But somebody had to do something in the passing game, and he was kind of the only one. Eddie Mitchell had 1 catch for 36 yards down the sideline, but after that, you had Michael Pittman, 2 catches, 19. Mo Alley-Cox, 1 catch, 15. It was Josh Downs' day, and he only got 4 targets, but caught 3 of them for 61 yards and a touchdown. And that, he got them a touchdown that didn't on a play that there shouldn't have been a touchdown on. It looked like by the design and by just the nature of it, he earned that with that crafty run along the sidelines, and that that ended up it smoothed this out on a day when they only have 11 attempts. And just a way to look at, like, Josh Downs is he's missed 3 games, so he's not going to be it's last year he played 17, but like his yards per game are up, and he's more than doubled his touchdowns from last season. Like, he had a breakout rookie year, and he found a way to take a step forward, even though he's been in and out with injuries at times. His quarterbacks are still in and out. It's the same deal about 2 very different styles of quarterback. That affects receivers a ton. It hasn't affected him a lot, and so I think he's a big time part of this offense still, and he showed it in a lesser, a small volume role, but still an effective role today.
That brings us to the last 2 categories, the ones we always end on, starting with one to throw away. One to throw away, Nate, what's one thing people are talking about after this game that's not going to be a thing, I guess, into the offseason, because we're close to the end of the season now?
Yeah.
Or the people aren't going to be talking about when the Colts hit their 8-game parlay and land in the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't.
If you're a gambler, you recognize the suspicion in that 8-game parlay comment.
I guess the thing I would say is I'd throw out, the notion, the hope, the belief, the expectation, whatever it is for you, that like Anthony Richardson's going to answer a ton of things these final few games that have not presently been there this season. The things he's been able to answer this within the season has been some of that preparation stuff and being a little bit more serious and dialed in. And I think some of that preparation has led to being at the best version of what he can be right now at the end of games has been good. And I guess, he's answered some of the durability stuff so far. But as far as the big questions with him are still accuracy and not only completion rate, but like avoiding accuracy issues that lead to interceptions. That is going to take something more than what he can do right now when he's just they're trying to game plan to win these games right now. For right now, they have to they have something to play for, even if the odds are not high. This game plan was all about killing them with the run game in order to win this. When you're in that mode and there's such a weight on trying to win the game, it's hard to make these mechanical changes that clearly need to happen with him. What he needs is a full offseason, which I brought this up before. That would be the case for hope for Anthony Richardson. He has to get a lot better as a passer, but he's not gotten an NFL offseason yet. Last year was pretty maligned with the shoulder surgery, the weight after that, and just getting some strength back in it to the point where he was sore as late as June. Josh Allen made a point about how big that was for him, and he got 2 full off seasons by the time he entered his 3rd year. Anthony's only going to have 1, but that's a lot more than 0. So he's going to need to get into the off season, and they're going to have to come up with a great plan. But it just isn't going to – if you're watching these games hoping that, like, he's just going to go out there and be like a decently high volume 65% passer, that it isn't realistic. And so I think if that's like if you're setting a test for yourself that like he has to look a certain way in these final couple games or you're out, I don't think it's realistic to think that that's on the table. So maybe you're just out. My thing is that he's got to play within what they're doing right now, which is a high volume rushing attack, and don't kill us through the air and add something on the ground. And while you're adding something on the ground, try and stay on the field. Like, that's got to be the realistic hope for him right now, I think.
That's a really good one. You came up with a really good one to throw away. One to throw away gets harder, I've noticed, as the season goes on, because stuff solidifies more. Things we think end up being more solid. Trying to think of a one to throw away here. It's kind of struggling a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tough one for that.
Because you think about the way this game went. It's a lot.
There's a really easy one if you want to take it. They're not going to set a franchise record in rushing every game.
You know what? Actually, that is a good one, and I'm going to build off of that.
All right.
The one to throw away is that you can run the ball this much and expect to win every game. It's just not going to happen. Like I was going through, because I wrote about the philosophy of Shane Steichen sticking with it. And I was going through, I was surprised a little bit by how many times Jonathan Taylor's had more than 20 carries 8 times this season. Like there have been games where they fed him and they weren't getting anything, like the Jets game, 24 carries, 57 yards. Like now, some of that maybe could be fixed if he had a helper, if he had an actual backup running back. But like you can't run the ball this much in the NFL and survive. If you don't have those 2 big runs, even if you run for, I mean, that's 200 yards without those 2 big runs. That's still really good. That's an incredible game. Did you score enough to beat them? Like, you can't run the ball this much. You want them to run the ball. You want Anthony Richardson to run the ball. Like, 9 carries for Anthony Richardson is about in the range where you want him. 9 to 11, somewhere in there. 9 to 12. You can't run the ball this much every game and expect to have a successful offense all the time. It's just not possible. Like, so the idea that you could just essentially become a 1970s offense again. Listen, I think if you look at the rushing stats, there's a lot of evidence that the way defenses are playing has opened up stuff for the running game. It's a good way to be effective. You know what no one's doing? No one's averaging 250 rushing yards per game.
Yeah.
This isn't you're going to run into defenses that even if you have a good game, you're not going to get the big play you need. Like you've got to be able to pass more. So that's a good one. You led me down the right path. Is like, this is great. It's a crazy game. It goes down in the record books. It's not a sustainable form of offense over the course of an entire regular season.
Oh, that's for sure. That's like it's like a college offense. Like it'd be like a Boise State. Is like
I called it 2013 Auburn in the press box today. Because that was the team that just ran zone read like literally every play. And threw it when they were in 3rd and long, which is kind of what the Colts did today. I mean, they did more than that in the running game, but that's kind of what the Colts did today. It's not a sustainable form of offense.
No, and like we pointed out, it came together the way it did today because this is the full best version of what they are in that area of the game where they had. I mean, outside Braden Smith being out is one thing, but I think, for the most part, they had their center back, they have Jonathan Taylor healthy and fresh, and Anthony Richardson healthy and fresh. And like we've seen a couple things go wrong with this, especially if they don't have the quarterback out there. It's going to be the same thing. And that's on top of, the opponents just don't let you do that all the time.
That leaves us with one to go on. One thing we're talking about now, we're going to be talking about the rest of the season. None of these wins are going to make people happy.
Yeah.
The Colts can win these next 2 games. It's not going to change the way we view them. It's not going to change the way you view them. I think most of you know where these teams are picking in the draft. The only thing I think that could change perceptions of this team at this point for this season is if they hit a 7-game parlay or a 5-game parlay with the Chargers completely tanking, make the playoffs, and then beat Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to have to do something in the playoffs too, not just sort of back their way in with some events happening. That's a good one. I guess what I'll say, one to go on is, and maybe this will age poorly, but I think they're going to keep running and beating really bad teams because the 2 teams they have next are very close to the top pick in the draft. In fact, the Giants are in line for it now that the Raiders lost. These teams are so bad. Like the Titans are bad, but I actually picked the Titans to win but that was more about I didn't know if the Colts would have the response, and then they did. That was coming out of last week. But like the Titans have more that they can go to than these other teams, I think. I guess maybe not. Titans just played the Jaguars in like one of the worst games ever played like a couple weeks ago. But the Giants especially are we're I don't know how much we're going to break down that matchup this coming week.
Can I read you the Giants points scored real quick in their 10-game losing streak?
Yeah.
7, 3, 18, 22, 17, 7, 20, 11, 14, 7.
Is that bad?
It's pretty bad. It's pretty rough.
All I know is when you're a bad team and you let Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney walk, you become a worse team.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So
they're bad.
This formula, they're not going to run for, I guess this will maybe disagree a little bit with your last take, but only in a very specific way. I do think they'll continue to run. They're not going to set franchise records, but they can have high volume and explosive running, and that alone should be enough to win. If Jonathan Taylor, he's not going to do this, but Jonathan Taylor has pretty vintage Jonathan Taylor days. I don't know that either of these teams have something that's going to beat that. So it's not, you'll see. Well, anything can happen. We've seen inexplicable things, especially last week against Jacksonville. We have seen that before, but I think that now that they're in this spot with this offense looking like it did, some of the changes they made to the run game and the personnel, it would be crazy to go away from it. And if they stick to that formula they use today, it's going to avoid the worst of them, which is, you'll keep that defense off the field some, although obviously that didn't fully work today. But also you're going to avoid the passing game dragging you down if you're able to keep it pretty low volume. And again, it's like a race against these teams are facing, it's like a race to 17 points. So use your run game to get there, and that should work.
Yeah, Giants pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty bad. I think that's probably a good one. We'll end on that. We're not going to pod again until after the holiday, so have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays from us to you. Really enjoy yourself. Have a good time. For the Colts Cover-2 podcast, I'm Joyous Erickson. This has been Nate Atkins. Nate, what are you looking forward to most on Christmas Day?
Sleeping to a point that the Christmas Day afternoon nap it always hits in the most incredible way.
Not a bad one.
I like that one. So
I'm a parent.
Not the most exciting Christmas, but in the middle of a long season, tail end of a long season like this, I'm going to enjoy that.
I'm a parent, so the sleeping thing is not for me. I will say the morning when they get downstairs. I always get up early, come downstairs, so I'm downstairs when they turn the corner and see the tree. It never gets old.
Oh yeah,
never gets old. Have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy your families. We'll be back to do something, but not probably not preview the Giants later this week. Enjoy yourselves.